G'day, Chief. Welcome to the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 349. I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs. I believe there is a great chief in all of us, and that through listening to the stories, strategies, and techniques of great CEOs and gurus, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work and life. The Inner Chief Podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO, like a true chief. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. On the Inner Chief Podcast, I bring these stories to life with deep diving CEO interviews, interspersed with minisodes covering key leadership challenges, so you will find your own path to greatness as an executive. Our topic today is a minisode on how to influence stakeholders and peers. Before we get into this episode, I just want to share a little resource for you. If you would like to follow along, I have a fully editable and download on how to influence key stakeholders. You go to chiefmaker.com/influence. The guide is all there for you. It has some of what we're going to cover today, but also some advanced questions, some scripts, mindsets that are really powerful in helping you influence your stakeholders. Who are we talking about? First and foremost, the question, Greg, I've just got this horrendous board member or team member at work that is so difficult. They block, they obstruct, they're obnoxious, they're toxic, or I just can't seem to get through them. They micromanage, they dip down. These are the kind of questions I get asked in the one-to-one environment all the time. Influencing stakeholders, getting through difficult stakeholders is one of the most important tasks and skills of all senior executives, particularly CEOs, where basically everyone is a stakeholder of you. So stakeholders can be peers at the same level, suppliers, customers, board members, executive team members, your boss, the community, media, anyone out there who's got a key stake in what you do. So, Chief, I just want to tell a couple of little stories first. The stories from the front line. I was working with, they'd be sort of a medium-sized company turning over a couple $100 million a year, and they had a really large tender going to a government-owned kind of corporation. This was big deal, like 20% of their revenue, kind of critical contract to get. And they went through their whole normal tender process from start to finish. And right at the end, they discovered that they weren't going to win the tender. And they had, thankfully, the wherewithal to then afterwards go back and say, hey, how come, like, now that this is all over and we're not going to win, why didn't we get the contract? Really, like we've heard some of your logical reasons, but what was the real reason? And one of the customers said, hey, look, the reality is when we first met with you, you came in, sat down, showed us your catalogs, your products, everything you're going to provide us. And you had all that, and it looked good. Your competitors walked in with an empty notepad and started asking questions. They wanted to know what was most important to us. And throughout the tender process, they were more dialed in than you were on just about everything. So in that moment, it was really clear the stakeholder, or the customer in this case, was not being heard. The second one is, I remember doing a large turnaround of a mining business in Africa. And I remember being at this mine site in Tanzania one day, and I was working with the general manager, and I was sitting down with him and we thought, and he was telling me about this process or this thing that was going on where they were losing money constantly because of trucks not being available, parts not being ready, or poor quality parts. They were trying to ramp up the production of the mine. And every day they tried to do this, they would go back, try and get their part or their vehicle, and it was broken down. So they couldn't get this momentum in increasing the production level of the mine. And I said, well, why don't you have parts? Why don't you have these machines ready? And he said, well, the finance team down in Johannesburg just won't get them for us. And I said, well, how much is this costing us per year? And he said, to the tune of $10 to $15 million a year in lost production. And I thought, what? I said, is there a project in our business that we're running now that can deliver that kind of return? And he said, no, nothing's close. So I said, well, let's get on a plane and go to Joburg. And we got on a plane, we went to Joburg, we sat down with the finance team. And what we discovered was they had been instructed by the CFO, for good reason, to reduce the cost in the business. So they had less parts available at site to save capital, and they had lower quality parts because that's cheaper. The production or the operations guys, though, were under a different instruction. They were told to increase production, not decrease the cost. So immediately we had these competing priorities. How do we solve it? We got the COO and the CFO on the line and said, hey, let's all just talk this through and get to an outcome. It took us about 90 minutes. Problem solved, stakeholders happy, back to site, stopped losing money. Okay, that is how easy this can be, but obviously it's not always that easy. The last one is, like, I had this drill sergeant boss. This was one of my last roles. And when I say drill sergeant boss, I mean he actually was formerly a drill sergeant in the army. And he was a good guy. I actually quite enjoyed his company, but dear me, like, was he a ball breaker to begin with? And I really had no idea how to respond to this level of intensity, the micromanagement that was going on. And so I sat down one day and I said, okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work out what is my personality and what is their personality. And I sat down and I actually did a Myers-Briggs model, and I worked out that from memory, I was an ENFP and he was an ESTJ. So we actually conflicted or butted heads just because of our natural way on 3 of the 4 different personality dichotomies. And what was really interesting was in the documentation or the guides I read, it spoke about where the points of conflict are most likely going to arise. And I used that. So what I did is I ended up creating a really clear, quite detailed weekly report. We used to meet at 3 o'clock on a Friday. I used to rue this meeting like I'm going into the weekend, and I just get hammered in this meeting. And so I went in though, and I sat down with this beautiful scorecard on all the business, all the projects we were running, who did what in the last week, what was coming next week, all our numbers, what I was doing about it. And the look on his face was just like one of complete amazement. He went, wow, this is really, really good. And so he started asking a bunch of questions, but they were completely different quality. And within a week, the level of micromanagement intensity completely left the room. I started to speak his language. I started to serve him in a way that looked after him. And it made all the difference. So, Chiefs, many, many different ways to deal with stakeholders. What we want to do is, first and foremost, understand that we have agency. We have some level of impact on any and every single relationship we have. To bring that ownership within us and then understand the trust is the currency of relationships. Without trust, between you and the stakeholder, there is no influence, ever. I built that trust with the stakeholder, with my boss, because I took the time to speak his language. We got the trust with the guys in Johannesburg because we took the effort to get on a plane and go and ask them, hey, what's going on for you? Trust is the currency of relationships. If you don't have it, we've got to go back and get it. I'm going to teach you a few ways that might help you get that, even with supremely difficult and prickly characters. So, Chiefs, there are all sorts of unintentional pitfalls. Look, I'm not going to labour on about all of them, but I suspect one of the most common is that we dance around these problems and we don't really lean into them. We end up fearing the conflict there and forgetting all of the other people that might be suffering as a result. So instead of going to bat for all those people, we actually just leave it fester and we kick the can down the road and nothing happens. The next person has the same problem that you do. So we just discount the amount of stress you're feeling and probably them as well, the impact on culture, on happiness, on flow, and results. So this is where we forget the importance of trust. Sometimes we move too fast without understanding their priorities. We don't get across their incentives, their motivations, what's going on inside their head, and the track record they're currently building, right? So what I would say, wrap this up, is we're unintentional with our influence. We wade into it, we avoid it. And that's what we really, really want to take control of now. Let's stop, use a little bit of process so we influence with integrity and intentionally. So how do we do that? First of all, let's get our mindset right. We really want to start from the outside with this thing that goes, let's seek to understand, right? Instead of trying to get a win whenever you go in a meeting, go back to, hey, I just want to build trust. I just want to understand. This is something that Tash Johnston, one of our oldest friends with Chief Maker, she really got a great result out of this. I've always loved the Albert Einstein quote because this does this great thing that says, calm down. Just stop trying to be successful. Stop trying to rush towards results and just be valuable to the people and the stakeholders in the room. The more you do that, the more you give to stakeholders above and beyond your remit, the more, as Noel Whittaker would say, the world will pay you back with interest. Chiefs, what I find super valuable, we cover this in the mini MBA in depth, is to pause and actually map out your stakeholders. On this map here that talks about, are they critical, important, or neutral to what you're doing? So if a stakeholder is absolutely critical to your success, then you have to get on top of that. That will cost you your project, your transformation, whatever it is you're working on. So we create this map. On one side is the importance, on the other side is how much support they give you. Are they a detractor, are they neutral, or are they ambassador? So if you can imagine, if you don't have the guide in front of you, if you want it, as I said, chiefmaker.com/influence, you imagine someone that is critically important to your success who is a detractor. Right, this person is number one for you, number one priority. Alternatively, if you've got someone who's critical and is an ambassador, who raves about you and supports you when you're not in the room, that's someone who you really want to leverage. So pause for a minute, start mapping out who are your stakeholders and how important they are and how much support you have out of each of them. Do they detract? Are they neutral? Or are they an ambassador? Right. As I said, there's a guide there if you want an actual map to do that. So first of all, get your mindset right, then start mapping, right? And then build a bit of an engagement plan. And you've got to do this for each person who is a stakeholder. Not a stakeholder group, one individual. When we're doing stakeholder influence, I want you to focus not on groups of people, but on one individual person. That's who you negotiate with. That's who you work with. Human to human, person to person, soul to soul, right? And we want to really get our heads around, who are they? What is their pressure and commitments? What are their dreams and goals? What is your level of reputation and trust, right? What's the reason that they have to work with you? This is marketing. This is sales, Chief. And just a few questions that might really help you. As I said, there's a full list in the download. But here's a couple to get you started. What is their personality compared to yours? What is their backstory away from work? Like, what was their career story, their life story before they even turned up here? I mean, you imagine how much better it would be if you were sitting down to talk with someone, get their buy-in, and you knew where they come from, who they are, what makes them tick. That's so important. What are their bonus-linked KPIs? What are the incentives they're under? There's a great saying. When you go to the racetrack, always bet on the horse called self-interest because it's the only one trying. People, and this is behavioral economics, will always be looking after themselves, right? That's human nature. It's not terrible, just what it is. Leverage that, Chief. If you understand that, what are their linked targets? What kind of pressure is their boss putting on them? How can you influence someone if you don't know what kind of heat they're getting from their boss? Right? Get across that. Hey, do you know what their dream job is? Might be the same as yours, by the way, but you've got to know that. Okay, you've really got to know that. Then ask yourself, hey, what level of trust do I have? Am I likable? Am I reliable? Am I capable? Have I delivered for them previously? I mean, if you've never delivered for this person previously and you've got a bit of a prickly relationship, you've got no chance. You've got to earn some trust here, Chief. All right, earn the right to go fast. Go slow. The old Delta Force saying, right? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. In the end, when you have done all this work, you've done the mapping and you've done the stakeholder engagement plan, really built out the sense of you get what makes this person tick, then you stop and get yourself ready for the conversation, right? And what we want to talk about there is, what is the outcome? When you go into that conversation, what do you want that person to think, feel, and do at the end of the meeting? Sometimes, Chief, I don't want them to think anything. I don't want them to do anything. I just want them to feel heard. I just want them to feel as though Greg took the time to really, really understand what was going on. Without any judgment, he maintained and shared a level of trust, treated me with dignity. Every person has a story, Chief, and they're dying to tell it. Start there, and you'll have an amazing experience and influence. So, Chief, that is how to influence key stakeholders at a high level. I really hope that helps you make some moves. So, just to recap from the top, first and foremost, really just have a bit of an assessment of some of the pitfalls you might be unintentionally making. These are the most important kind of conversations you're going to have. The cost of getting them wrong is enormous for you and for others and for results. For your career, you have to get this right. This builds reputation and brand. Remember, your brand or your reputation is what people say about you when you're not in the room or what they really think about you. It's an opportunity to shine. Lean into these moments. The more you can do them better, right, the more you're performing and people go, wow, that is a great person. That's a great executive. I really want to work with him again in the future. Get your mindset right, do your mapping, build a stakeholder engagement plan, then plan that first meeting. So, Chief, I hope that helps. If you want a more in-depth coaching experience around that, Chief, go to chiefmaker.com/mini MBA because we cover this in depth. We have all sorts of examples. People share their wins and losses, and we really lean into it, and we just get results, even with the most tricky of individuals. So, Chief, as always, remember to stay epic. Chief, you can find all the show notes at chiefmaker.com/349. Chief, one of the biggest challenges in all leadership roles is how to influence stakeholders. The difficult, the easy, the elusive, all sorts of stakeholders, board members, executive teams, clients, suppliers, the media, the community, And if you want the definitive guide on how to think about it, how to set yourself up and prepare for it, how to run through and map your stakeholders, and how to finally influence with integrity, go to chiefmaker.com/influence for a fully editable PDF guide on mastering stakeholder influence. That's chiefmaker.com/influence. And if you would like to stay in touch and hear all about some of the best resources that you can find anywhere in the world to improve your performance at work, go to chiefmaker.com/subscribe. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chiefs, as always, remember to stay epic.